I now have 6:30, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can we please have the roll call, please?
Ms. Kolianos,
Here?
Mr. Bolton,
Here.
Mr. Tunstall, Ms. Protermitis, Ms. Page,
Here.
Ms. Johnson's not here.
Do we have any public comments this evening? Any general public comments? Yes. No, no, just general comments. Okay. Can we have the quasi-judicial announcement and the swearing in of speakers, and maybe also an explanation of that only 3 of us are present?
Of course. So before I do the quasi-judicial announcement and swearing in of speakers, the Heritage Preservation Board does have a rule in force that any applicant before the board, when there's not a full membership here, can ask to have their application moved to the next meeting. The reason for this is that any application that is heard tonight, the only way it will pass is for a unanimous vote of the 3 members of the board that are currently present. Are there any applicants here this evening that wish to have their application moved to the next meeting of the Heritage Preservation Board? There are 5 members and 1 alternate, so the majority of the full board is needed. A vote of a majority of the full board is needed in order for an application to pass. So tonight, all 3 members must vote in favor to have an application pass. That is true, but the application will be continued from this meeting to the next meeting.
And so because we're doing a date certain, we don't actually have to re-advertise. It'll just show up on the next meeting agenda.
Are there any applicants wishing to postpone their applications this evening? Okay. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and read the quasi-judicial announcement. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Heritage Preservation Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any applicants or anyone here wishing to speak or testify this evening? Please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. We'll go ahead and move on to our first case, which is CA number 1676, the City of Tarpon Springs Rose Cemetery on Jasmine Avenue, application for designation as historic property. And Heather,
Thank
would
you.
like to read
Heather
about that?
Erler, with the planning director for the City of Tarpon Springs and staff on this particular application. This is a somewhat interesting application. We haven't had one of these here in the city for a while, and this is actually a 2-part application. The first part is just the city offering support through this board and again through the Board of Commissioners as well for the application for this project to actually be listed on the National Register should the federal government choose to do so. It'll have several additional layers of review that it will go through as part of that process. then the applicant has also expressed interest in having a local designation for that property, recognizing that that property is significantly removed from our existing historic district. It's not something that we can just bring into our district. So as a result, this would basically be its own district. The cemetery, basically the parameter of the cemetery, the legal description, would become its own local designated site. The applicant at this particular point, unfortunately, was not able to attend. However, he's expressed interest in moving forward with both applications simultaneously. Obviously, they don't want to slow down the National Register application because that takes so long going through the process, but they recognize that there are steps involved with our local designation process as well. So with that, the applicant is requesting support of an application to designate the Rose Hill Cemetery as a historic place on the National Register, and they are also seeking that local designation. Again, this property is located at 0 Jasmine Avenue. The future land use is institutional, which is consistent with a cemetery type use. It's a public, semi-public type institution, so that's the reason why that future land use category is. Its zoning is land conservation, which is also consistent with the use that is existing on this particular piece of property. The Rose Hill Cemetery is located on Jasmine Avenue, just south of East Cypress Street, and consists of 4.63 acres. The earliest verified burial was in 1904. The Rose Hill Cemetery Association was formed and received a lease from the cemetery in 1916. And in 1917, the cemetery was deeded to the Rose Hill Cemetery Association. The Rose Hill Cemetery is a significant historical cemetery that preserves a strong African-American ethnic character. The cemetery has remained in constant use into the present, consisting of over 1,000 grave plots. And those are verified plots. What was included in the backup here is the actual register that the Rose Hill Cemetery Association has done. However, there are many burials that happened on this site prior to the site actually having verifiable burials. There are burial records that precede this information that are more familiar based. The tradition previously hadn't been necessarily writing down written records because you're dealing with a population here that may or may not be able to write. So many times they interred folks into these cemeteries, and there just was no physical remnants of that burial. So there are burials, and they have over time attempted to verify some of those burials through familial records and that type of thing, but that's going to be an ongoing process, probably into infinity for these folks into time. With that, the Rose Hill Cemetery is nominated to the National Register of Historic Places for local significance under Criterion 1 in the area of ethnic, heritage, Black, and social history for its association with racial segregation practices and the development of the Tarpon Springs African American community, and as a site at which the community members maintain Southern and African American burial practices. Cultural beliefs from the African and Southern American traditions are apparent in the east-west orientation of graves, the scraping, or which is also a rake. It's also commonly called raking as well, of the individual grave sites, positioning of couples, chairs, benches, decorative elements on graves, such as conch shells and symbols engraved on the markers. The Rose Hill Cemetery maintains its historical integrity and has remained in active use by the African American community of Tarpon Springs since its inception. The applicant is requesting our support for the application to designate the Rose Hill Cemetery as a historic place on the National Register. At this time, the applicant is also seeking the designation as a local historic site. And the recommendation of staff is to support the applicant's request for the designation of the Rose Hill Cemetery as a historic place on the National Register, and to approve the listing of the Rose Hill Cemetery as a local historic site. And with that, this application includes a myriad of information. There's several maps in here. There's the basic information that comes common with all of your applications, but with that is also the proposed National Register form with a narrative that was actually done by Tina Bucavalis. She worked tirelessly on this application. She unfortunately was unable to be here. She's got prior engagement, but that being said, she has worked tirelessly with Mr. Quarterman, who is the representative for the Rose Hill Cemetery Association, and really maintains the Rose Hill Cemetery. They've done a fabulous job here with documenting the pictures that they have are really high-quality pictures from what I normally get for these types of applications, and the narrative is just, it's very helpful, useful, and it's very detailed. So with that, staff has no concerns that this application will not be successful, and we recommend wholeheartedly and enthusiastically to support not only the National Register designation, but also the local designation. And just kind of before you guys talk, let me just go over a little bit about what that local designation process is so that you guys have a little bit better handle on what the next steps are. So depending upon what this board chooses to do tonight, okay, you'll make some type of recommendation. That's not common for this board. Generally, you make a decision on your certificates of approval at the end of the night. The applicant would know at the end of the night that yes or no, or these are the parameters under which that I can develop. That's a little bit different here. This board on this particular type of application functions more like the planning board does, where they're a recommending body. You would then recommend through a report, which would probably be done by staff. Again, I can provide that information to you so you'll see ahead what we're actually going to provide, but it'll be very similar to what you're seeing as far as the application materials going forward to the board. That report, basically at that time when that's given to the board, we're going to ask for two things. One is a letter of support from the Board of Commissioners for the National Register application so that that application can move forward, and so that it clearly has the support of the city available for the reviewers so that we don't slow down their process. Alternatively, we'll also ask for the Board of Commissioners to decide whether they would like to locally designate this site or not. Now, there may be a bifurcation between when those two things happen. We may support just the National Register application moving forward initially because that's what the applicant's really looking for. It's where they're focusing their energy, and then let them come back and actually do a second report to the board to support that local designation. At that time, the board chooses to do one of two things. Either they choose to direct staff to develop an ordinance, and then that ordinance runs through its process, or they choose to not deny the application, and therefore it ends at that point. But all that will be impacted at that point will just be the local designation. It won't be the National Register designation. That National Register designation, obviously they want our support, but it's not required as part of their application process. So I just wanted to make it really clear because this is a very convoluted code and you don't use this section very often of your code. So as a result, if you have any questions, please let me know, but that's really what the process is going to be after this step. And this is their initial step. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions?
I just wanted to comment on how incredible this backup material is. I was fascinated by reading about the African American influence on the sponging industry in the late 1800s that I had no idea even existed. Even the grave markings with the sponge divers engraved in them, I just had no idea, and I thought I knew a lot about Tarpon's history. So there was a ton of things in here that was just really, really interesting, and thank you.
You're very welcome. Actually, that all is Tina. I mean, she did all of the research on this application. She's worked with some of the county support as well, but she's handled that. I mean, I just wrote a very brief thing because I think her narrative is just fascinating and interesting in itself, and I don't want to take away from it. It really is a very interesting history that particular site has had, and the impact that that's had on this community is just fascinating. So it was a really privilege to be part of this type of application.
Any other comments? Do I have anybody who would like to speak from the audience in support or opposing this application? Okay. Do I hear a motion from the board?
Would the motion be exactly what the recommendation is then?
Yes.
So I would move that we offer our approval wholeheartedly for the applicant's request to designate Rose Cemetery as a historic place on the National Registry, and 2, to approve the listing of the Rose Cemetery as a local historic site.
And do we have a second? Second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Page?
Yes, I approve.
Mr. Bolton?
Yes.
Ms. Kolianos?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to application CA 1678, and this is 2027 Norfolk LLC, 106 West Park Street, replacement of windows with plate glass, installation of new metal window grates, restoration of existing doors, and repair of existing siding.
Yes, for the record, Lisa Wargo, principal planner, excuse me. Property is located, as you mentioned, at 106 West Park Street, and is located within the WDI-A zoning district, and has a future land use designation of commercial general. The applicant is seeking a certificate of approval for renovation and restoration of an existing two-story structure, which was originally utilized as a sponge processing factory and warehouse, and formerly known as the E.R. Mears Sponge Packing Plant. The structure was originally constructed circa 1905, consisting of a wood frame with corrugated metal panel, siding, and roof. The proposed use of the structure, once renovated and restored, will be for warehouse storage with an accessory office, or for retail sales, which are permitted uses within the WDI-A zoning district. In reviewing an application for certificate approval, the board shall consider the following criteria. The height and width of any proposed alteration or new construction shall be consistent with that of the adjacent contributing structures and of similar character and architectural style found throughout the immediate neighborhood or the district. Staff's analysis. The requested renovations and restoration are proposed on an existing structure. The height and width of the structure shall remain the same. Number 2, the width and height of the windows, doors, and entries shall be consistent with the character of the building's original architectural style. Repair or replacement of missing architectural features such as windows, mullions, doors, entries, handrails, etc. should be based on accurate duplications substantiated by historic, physical, or pictorial evidence. Staff finds that the proposed improvements are, in answer to this, the proposed improvements are as follows. Windows. The panes in the existing windows are missing. The wood frames are deteriorated wood with 8 rectangular pane frames. The replacement windows proposed for replacement are 1/4 inch fixed panel, single pane sheet glass, installed with framed materials made of pressure-treated hard pine. The framing materials will be treated with a distress stain or paint to the panels that are rusted. These will be preserved and some remounted over the new doors, and some mounted over new windows as an awning decoration. New window openings will only be permitted on the side or the rear wall as outlined by the National Register Local Historic District Design Review Guidelines Manual. The conceptual drawings show that the new window openings are proposed on the south side wall of the building. Window awnings. This will be a new feature being added. The existing windows are covered with mounted iron grid panels. The request includes the addition of grates mounted above the new windows to match the existing window design and character. Additional 3-pane transom windows may be added above the iron grids. Doors. The original doors will be restained and restored. The methods of sanding and staining being proposed for the doors would result in a weathered look consistent with the materials and colors of the existing structure. All new doorway entries added will need to be consistent with the weathered appearance and materials of the existing doors. New doorway entries will only be permitted on the side or rear wall as outlined by the National Register Guidelines Manual. The conceptual drawings show that the new doors and openings are proposed on a north side wall of the building. The siding and roof. The existing corrugated metal siding and roof will be retained, repaired, and restored. Holes in the siding and roof will be patched and sanded to match existing weathered gray siding. Rusted areas will be treated and painted to match the existing weathered gray color. Lighting. New vintage maritime lighting with filament bulbs are proposed. The specifications and design of which are included within the report. Signs. All existing building signs will be preserved. Landscaping. The lot will be cleaned up of any remaining debris, and palms consistent with Florida-friendly plant materials will be added. Under number 3 criteria, the relationship of a structure within a historic or cultural preservation district to the open space between it and the street and to other buildings or scenic views, vistas, or streetscapes characterized in areas shall be protected through site plan review process. Staff's review. The repair, restoration, and renovation plans will be required to be reviewed, permitted, and brought up to meet the Florida State Building Codes and the city's Land Development Code regulations. The property is not located within a scenic view corridor, and the zoning district allows for the proposed uses. Restoration of the structure would be consistent with and contribute to the upkeep of the neighboring land uses. Number 4, the shape and texture of the roof shall replicate the shape, texture, and type of roof distinguishing the building's original architecture. Staff's response. This is not applicable. The roof line will not be impacted or changed by the requested repairs and restoration. Number 5, the size and mass of the building after alteration shall be reflective of the building's original architecture and should reflect the character of contributing buildings within the district as well as those immediately surrounding the subject property. Staff's review. The character of the facade of the building will continue and be consistent with the former use and character of the structure. Care should be taken in the design of the structure in relation to the R60 1 and 2 family residential zoning district located to the east. Number 6, landscaping shall be utilized as means to enhance the architectural character and appearance of the structure and to protect and define open spaces and pedestrian ways. Our analysis is that minimal landscaping is proposed consisting of Florida-friendly shrubs and palms. Number 7, distinctive architectural features shall be repaired rather than replaced wherever possible. Architectural details shall be treated so as to make the building consistent with the property's original architectural style and character. New materials should replicate the material being replaced in composition, design, color, texture, and other visual qualities. Staff's analysis. With exception to the replacement windows, the added iron grid awning treatments and the proposed new door on the northern side wall and windows on the southern side wall openings, all other repairs, restorations, or renovations are consistent with this requirement. Number 8, all building structures, sites, and traditional cultural properties should be recognized as products of their own time, and alterations, modifications, or changes to a structure or traditional cultural property shall not attempt to create an earlier appearance than the original date of construction. The analysis is, the proposed changes are not expected to reflect an earlier time. Number 9, the renovation of contributing structures in a historic or cultural district are designated sites and shall meet the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. Staff's analysis is, recommendations are being proposed by staff for consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards. Number 10, the proposed project shall conform to other requirements of this code and be in compliance with applicable goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff's analysis, the project meets the requirements of the LDC and the WDIA zoning district regulations and the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. And the final, number 11, the impact upon archaeological sites shall preserve the integrity of the site. And our analysis is that no archaeological sites will be impacted. For staff's recommendations, staff recommends approval of the applicant's request with the following recommendations and/or conditions. Number 1, all replacement windows shall be 6/6 pane windows or 2/2 window pane design windows as a minimum. Windows shall not be highly tinted, and muntins may be wood, anodized aluminum, or vinyl. Number 2, the addition of new window or door openings shall only occur on the side and rear walls of the structure and shall not be larger or inconsistent with the size and shape of the existing window and door openings. Number 3, new doors added shall be of the same material, texture, and color of the existing original doors. And number 4, the transoms being proposed shall be multi-paned as proposed to match the multi-pane design of the windows. There is a time limitation of approval. Should you approve, it should be valid for a period of 3 years from the date of approval by this board. Any questions?
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for the city?
I do. The renderings that we were given, your recommendation on doors and windows, I don't know what you're calling side and rear, so there's 4 or 3 renderings. Are any of these not part of what you're saying you would approve?
No, the front facade would be facing,
South?
it's the right-of-way to the west. That's the front facade?
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, yes.
Facing east? So
Yes,
this
that
our-
is the front
Facing
facade.
west, I'm sorry. So
It's
this
facing
is-
west.
This is facing east.
So your two
is
sides would be to
facing
the
west.
north and the south, the 2 side walls.
So on the west elevation, you're saying your recommendation would be not to approve that window or to approve it?
I think it's already existing on the
Okay.
west side.
But I'm just
The only
making
place that we're
sure.
recommending or saying that we would agree with them putting in the new windows or new door openings are on the side or the rear walls where that's actually where it's only permitted under the guidelines.
Okay, so
Okay.
basically what you're saying you would recommend is what we're seeing here on
The
the, you're
plan.
not changing these renderings by what you're recommending.
Correct,
Okay,
with the
that's-
exception
that's
of
about
the
probably better way to
size
ask.
of the openings and the type of windows that are being requested.
Thank you.
So the understanding is they were asking for the single pane windows, and you're recommending the 6?
6/6 or 2/2?
Okay.
Is that because that's what would have been there originally, or,
What exists currently, well, a lot of the windows aren't even there,
right,
the panes, but what exists now are 8 panes.
from that time period or installed at a later time frame?
I don't see where they were ever replaced.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll have an opportunity for the applicant to speak. Did they haven't taken the oath yet, right?
I can swear them in.
Okay, good. All right. Would the applicant like to, be sworn in and be able to speak on this behalf?
You can just come, if you want to be sworn in, whoever's going to speak can stand and raise their right hand, and I'll swear you in. Yeah, that's fine. No, you're quite all right.
We just have the microphones on. I want you
Do
to.
you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and then just state your name and address. And
Matthew Hausch, 701 Lanston Court.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Would you like to speak about your application?
Yeah, mainly just making myself available to help answer questions. But a lot of the windows that are on the structure, it's an old sponge building that was from 1900. There's no real rhyme or reason to how they put them in. They're just threw up windows a lot of times to fill the voids in the side of the wall. So the windows that we want to fix or add is trying to make it look representational of an older window, which would be a 2/2. It just has 2/2 means instead of a solid pane, it has one mullion in the middle, so it makes 2 panes of glass over 2 panes of glass. Or what's there now, they're like smaller windows with more mullions that separate it. So our idea was just to keep it simple, just 1 pane over 1 pane, and if we want to do 2/2 to be more representative of a historical building, that's completely fine.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question on the rendering of the north side. Now, you're going to add an access door that is not in existence there?
No, there's already a couple of doors there, but they're really not functional. They're like sliding barn doors, so we just want to repair the doors that are there. A lot of the wood's rotten, so we'll probably try to keep as much of the original structure and just redo the frames and make them functional again.
I showed 3 doorways, and 2 are double, and 1 is single. Is that correct, on the north side?
Can I see the rendering? So since we originally drew it, this door in the middle is kind of there, a sliding door. these were potential doors that when we talked, when we were drawing this up, that we might add, but as of right now, we don't have a plan to put those doors in.
So these other two doors are not gonna happen?
Correct.
Okay, and what does this mean? Access may vary, though north elevation as project develops within gated area hidden to the public.
Because the north side can't be seen.
Right.
On the side of the roads, because the west side and the south side are visible to the roads.
Yes.
So depending on, really, it's just storage on that north side for us, for the equipment and whatnot, so I think you made that note saying we might add a door, not add a door, but it's not visible to any of the roads or anything.
I had a question for the board, I suppose, about that. The north side is used for storage presently, and, there is an indication here for landscaping, in item G, so how does that, if that can't be seen, how does the landscaping impact the project? What are the plans for the
Did
landscape?
it say the residential homes to the west?
No, to the north, on the north side. The north side is not currently visible
Yeah,
because
the north
of-
side, and there's another building adjacent to us on the north side.
Right.
So it's really nothing visible from it, really the street, and we have it fenced off now, so.
A commercial to commercial, buildings do not require buffering or that type of thing. It's only when you get into, specific uses that are non-compatible, so elevations that would be adjacent to residential in this case because of the storage use would have to be somewhat screened. Now, we will work with them because again, we don't want to change the historical integrity by adding too much landscaping. There's a fine line between adding trees and things to make it and screen it for folks and then completely changing the historical character of the type of landscaping and things that would be on that site. And so we have to walk kind of a fine line with the applicant, but a lot of the screening requirements will be determined by the Land Development Code when we get into that process with the applicant where they actually come in and do their renovations. When they start showing us how the site's gonna function and what they wanna do with that site, if there is some modification that would require them to come back, we would obviously bring them back, but generally those are handled as part of this process. And I would expect that there would be very limited changes, that really it's the structure of the building, not so much the function of the site, that really needs to be altered here. So what they're trying to do is just kind of use Florida-friendly landscaping
Sure.
to fit the character of that building. So, but they wouldn't be required to put in any types of buffers or those type of things between uses that are similar.
That was just my question was about these doors when it's not really a visible area anyway on the rendering, these extra doors that were proposed.
I understand you're going to keep the original writing on the building? Is that, was
Yeah,
that part of
there-
it?
The plan is to keep all that, because we grew up in Tarpon too, and we love like the old buildings and the historical nature of, and we're trying to preserve as much as that as we can. The only one, if we probably could, there is the signage on the north side of the building that has a name that potentially, like, we might put a name of the building or a business name or something like that, because the west side has a really cool old like sponges across it, which I
Right.
think is the most visible side. The I'm sorry, I think I said north. It's the east side. Correct me.
West
Yeah.
side.
The west side is the one that faces Roosevelt that says sponges. The east side has a name that's on there on the building that we would probably change and maybe put some signage. That would be the only one that we could maybe discuss if it's possible. I don't know.
Well, any signage that you were proposed outside of what's currently on the building based on what the application you bring, it would have to come back through HPB for approval. And they would need to see actually what your rendering is gonna look like specifically for the type of
Sure, and we
signage you
don't
would
really
want to do
know.
that. And I know you're
Now
still.
we would just say we leave everything intact, and then when we come to that point, we could revisit it then.
Exactly, and again, we can get them on here in a fairly quick turnaround if necessary to deal with the signage and that type of thing. All we would just ask is just let staff know when you're starting to get to that point where you're interested in that, so that we can start you through the process, and we'll go over exactly what you need to do, because signage is handled a little bit differently
Sure.
than renovations of just the building itself.
Right.
But we'd be glad to help you through that process
We're
as well.
just trying to make it dry and airtight and functional, and, it's just been an old abandoned building for a while, so that's the intent.
So I'm gonna revisit the door issue, just to make sure I'm clear on the north side. Because recommendation number 2 is the addition of a new window or door openings shall only occur on the side and rear walls of the structure and not be large or inconsistent. Okay. So the doors that are on the proposed rendering of the north side, the additional doors, at this point, you're saying no, they're not gonna happen?
Yeah, at this point in time, when we originally drew these up to get here, we were talking about maybe adding some doors, and I think now we're just thinking it's leave what's there, repair it, and not add the additional doors just because it's gonna be storage on that side.
Shall we amend that recommendation at this point? Because
Well, according to
There-
the guidelines, the design guidelines, they are permitted to have those openings
Okay.
on the side or rear wall. This was just recommending, this was just kind of tying that down to say if there are any additions,
Right.
new
least
openings,
they're
new
approved.
doors, that that's where they have, that's the only place that they can occur.
I see, I understand now, thank you.
But the issue is here, if you're not proposing them at this time, you can't really reserve the right to come back to do that. You would actually have to come back to this board, because the board would then have to approve whatever design door you're gonna do, especially if it's different than what's here. Essentially, what this board generally does is everything that's on the rendering, it's either specifically approved, or it's changed, or there's some type of thing. So if it's something that you want to request right now, we would include that in the conditions as it's approved. If you choose not to go forward with it, there is no penalty for not adding things to a historic structure. However, the penalty is if you add things that are not been approved by this board, then you're violating the land development code.
Right, understand
So,
that.
yeah,
Right.
you'd wanna.
We'd wanna leave them in there, and then if we don't do it, it's better than
Exactly.
amending them
You're gonna
not to
wanna
do
make
it.
that decision to make sure we're clear tonight on what's going on and what the board's concerns are, if they are. I mean, if this elevation is not visible from the street, this may be the elevation to allow additional, doors to be on that side, because it's not gonna change that historical appearance of the building. However, if it's something that you don't think you're going to need them, then we can just strike them from the application completely. But it's at this point, it's really a discussion for you to have with the board on how you want to do that. They're allowed, it's just a question of how we're gonna do that, because we can't just reserve them if you're not sure you don't need them or not. If it's a question of, well, I'd rather have them approved at this point, and then if we choose not to go forward with them, I am completely comfortable with that, because this board's not going to penalize you for not putting in doors. However, certainly, if we find out additional openings have been put in, we're gonna have concern, and then you're gonna have to come here, and it will be a less uncomfortable meeting. So, I would rather have that kind of fleshed out today. Either we approve them and we put that in as part of the condition, or we don't, and we basically remove it from the application. And I'd be basically at the discretion of the board, whichever way you want to do this between you and the applicant. If you want to leave those doors there, I'm comfortable with leaving that, provided that the board all agrees in their motion that those doors are fine, provided if they choose to go forward, they would just go through the permitting process, and whatever they approved has to be consistent with what you approve here tonight. Materials and that type of thing, because you're basically approving the entire package.
I think if they're okay with them, then we just leave them, and then
Okay.
as long as there's not a.
It seems to, I see a lot of heads shaking, that seems to be okay, so.
There barn doors there now, they're sliding barn
Yeah,
doors
it's a sliding barn door in the middle of the building now.
in the middle, which is the existing door.
Correct, yeah.
And the other two that you're proposing to put in are going to be, well, it just says that they will be not larger,
Yeah.
and they'll be consistent with the existing door. So,
But we're trying to just match as best as possible
Right.
with codes and whatnot, like a historical looking, like, probably like a tongue and groove type board or a bead board or something like that. There's even some materials that are on site, maybe we can structurally do the door and then harvest those materials and just kind of put a facade on the door to be representative of the building.
my question was just really about the opening and the integrity of the building and structure of the building. I'm no engineer, I know nothing
Yeah.
about this, but I'm just wondering, adding.
Hey, for the building, the doors would help it, because we would have to secure the building up to get them to go in. They were just access points, because on opposing ends of the building, to be able to easily get in the building, so.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
So, do we have anyone in the audience opposed or would like to speak in favor of this application?
No, approach
need
the
to come up
podium and
here.
state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Renee Torres. I live at 400 Grand, which is kind of across the way from it. And I just want to say that I have two comments. I think it's wonderful what they're doing because I've lived there for 6 years, and that site, it's surprising it's still there, and it didn't burn down because the prior people that were cabinet makers would actually burn their scraps. And the fact that that building is still there is a miracle. But my other comment, and I'm not sure where it fits in the scheme of things, we just had 2 townhouses built across the way from them. And there's a third one slotted, and they're slotted at $600,000+. And they're going to be non-compatible uses in the future as these people that are paying this money for these houses may interfere. And not that they're making any great noise or anything, but it is industrial equipment that has automatic alarms when it goes into reverse. So it does make noise. And so I don't know where that gets addressed, but I suspect that if those 3 townhouses, and I know of 2 other houses that are coming in, so at some point there's going to be issues to be contend or thought of, and I don't know what happens then.
That area isn't in the historic district. I don't believe on the other side of Roosevelt.
No, would you like me to answer that?
Yes,
does that?
please,
Okay.
please.
How this works is this particular site, and there are several in the historic district, there is a mix match of all types of uses all throughout your historic district. And that is characteristic of many historic communities, especially a community here that had a marine culture. Okay, you have lots of times you had boat building going on right next to residential. It's super common. You'd have warehouses and all types of marine uses. You still see that pattern all over Florida. That being the case, there is a segregation of uses in the Land Development Code. However, this particular piece of property is WDIA, I believe, which allows for the use that's proposed, which may not be compatible and consistent as it appears, but the zoning district does allow that use, and therefore it's consistent with the zoning district there. There may be conflicts that come up between the residential that's kind of grown up around these type of uses, but as a result of the existing land uses, they are compatible as determined by your Board of Commissioners. Now, that's not to say that those residents that are now coming into this, I mean, the building's been vacant for a number of years, so it's not like people have known that, but you're on notice under your due diligence period to check when you're moving into a community, especially into a specific neighborhood that has different types of uses in it, to determine what those uses that are allowed in your neighborhood are there. So you're on notice that there is a commercial building adjacent to those residential buildings. While there are some conflicts there, those conflicts in this particular case are mitigated for as a result of the zoning districts. The uses that are being proposed in these zoning districts are consistent. There just isn't a common type buffer. Normally when you have residential and industrial type uses adjacent to each other, there's some type of buffering system. That buffering system doesn't exist in history, and it's not going to exist in the future as a result of this, because if we require them to add buffering that isn't required on this site, we're asking them to do something that is above and beyond, and this board doesn't have the power to do that. This project, because it's an existing site, will come through this board, and that will be the only board that it comes through. After that, it will go through the resident or the commercial site planning process, which essentially my department and the building department, fire department, and several other departments here in the city will verify that all the codes and ordinances that the city has adopted, and the fire code and the building code, everything is met as a result of this site. But the site will be limited in the changes that are going to be required simply because of its use is consistent with the previous use, that's consistent with the use over time. It's not a drastic change of use here where we're getting into use is completely different. So because the use is completely different, you guys are actually authorizing a change of use. We're not getting into that here. This has always been a processing facility of some sort. You may change what you're actually processing, but you're dealing with the same uses. So as a result, we're very limited here in the planning department on what we can actually require this applicant to do. We're going to basically make them bring it up to modern code as much as possible, but most of that modern code deals with the building itself, the structure, and any fire protections that are required. It doesn't deal with land use conflict type uses, and you have lots of conflicting land uses all over Tarpon Springs. This is not an uncommon issue, and it's going to something that we're going to face going forward for a long period of time to come. But the only thing that I can caution folks who are looking at property and buying properties in the city is our department is open 8 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday. We'd be glad to go over all the different land uses and specific uses on a piece of property so that people know going in what's allowed in the area that they're moving into. But in this particular case, the use is allowed, it's consistent with the land use. The residential that is adjacent to it is consistent and allowed in its land use. So in this case, there's not a big buffer between those land uses. And you do have many examples of that here in Tarpon Springs, probably a little bit more so than some communities. So that's really all, unfortunately, that we can do for protections on this particular property.
Very good.
No, that's okay.
Any more comments from the board?
I'd just like to say there have been properties that I think are.
We have another
We
public.
have
Oh,
some
we do.
folks-
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry.
If you'd like
Approach
to
the
come up.
podium and-
Thank you.
My name is Renee Plaza, and we are one of those people that live across the street at 419 Roosevelt. And we're also thankful to see that area is being cleaned up and love the historic landmarks there. The only comment we would make, and we knew that obviously when we moved in as well, is we've gone from, and we don't really live much in the front of the house, so it doesn't really bother us. There's not much noise that goes on over there yet. But one thing that has changed significantly since we've moved in is we've gone from having a greenscape over there to, and they've cleaned it up significantly to put equipment in. We now have a chain link fence we're looking at with black tarp running through it. And my only comment would be, as you guys get ready to landscape, is there any way or a different look that we could have there to be more consistent with the neighborhood? And that would be our only comment.
Thank you. I'm sorry,
Oh,
David.
I
You
was-
were-
You can go up here, yeah.
In regards to the fence, we had just the chain link fence, and as part of the code, actually, to have opaque screening on the fence. So we had to actually add the opaque screening to the fence. So that's why that had to go in. But we can certainly look at some shrubbery or something in the front to help, or, you know, whatnot like that. But that wasn't our first intention, but that's actually part of the code we found out, we had to have that up. So that answers that one.
Okay, thank you. David?
I just want to say that I think, having been on this board a while, it's been, it's interesting when you see historical structure, when somebody has a desire to take something and restore it and make use of it, versus somebody looking for a reason, and bringing in a litany of engineers to try and tell us why we should tear it down. So this was a refreshing application to have, and this is a true testimony of what we would like people to do in the city. So I was excited to see this. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion about the recommendations?
Yes, I move that we approve the applicant's request with the following conditions: that the replacement windows shall be 6x6 pane windows. And the windows shall not be tinted. Muntins may be wood. And anodized aluminum or vinyl. And the addition of new window or door openings shall only occur on the side and rear walls of the structure and shall not be larger or inconsistent with the size and shape of the existing window and door openings. New doors added shall be of the same material, texture, color of the existing and original doors. And transoms being proposed shall be multi-paned to match the multi-pane design of the windows.
Second?
Yes. Second?
I second.
Okay. Ms. Page?
Yes, I approve this application.
Mr. Bolton?
Yes.
Ms. Kolianis?
Yes. Yes. So now we'll move on to the next, yes, sir. We're going along with the application,
Yes.
the recommendation of the city, that's what I proposed, okay.
Thank you.
Our next application is CA 16-80. Signature Group of Tampa Bay LLC, 309 East Tarpon Avenue. Request to retain previously installed grasscrete block parking area on site.
Okay, yes, as you mentioned, this property is located at 309 East Tarpon Avenue and is within the SAP, the Special Area Plan T4A Transact Zone zoning district, and has a future land use designation of Community Redevelopment District, or CRD. The structure is a frame vernacular style and was constructed circa 1905. The building was constructed with wood frame and drop siding. There is a full width front deck under a gabled porch with a steep pitched metal corrugated roof. New additions include French entry doors, turned wood railings, and gingerbread ornamentation on the porch columns. There is also a one-story wood shed added in 1955 as an outbuilding consisting of metal and wood cove siding. Second story has been converted to an apartment. The structure has been used as a single-family residential home, a 1 to 5 unit boarding apartment house, and as an antique store with a rental apartment above in the past. The applicant is seeking a certificate of approval to be able to keep previously permitted and installed pervious turf block parking area in the front of the structure to serve the retail and residential uses permitted on site. The special area plan and the zoning district allows for mixed uses.
Excuse me. I just want to make sure. In mine, it says the applicant is seeking a certificate of approval to be able to keep the previously permitted and installed pervious grasscrete paving. It doesn't say previously. You said previously permitted parking.
I'm sorry, pervious. That's
Okay.
installed pervious turf block parking.
There's a pervious versus parking, because I think that's an issue with this
Okay.
application, so I want to clarify.
Okay, but it was permitted.
The grass block, yes.
Right. Okay. The special area plan in the zoning district allows for mixed uses as well as residential, limited retail sales, bed and breakfast inns, apartment buildings, offices, artist studios, and restaurants, as well as other uses. The amount of parking required for a single use in this case could be from 1.5 spaces to 4 spaces, depending on the use, and porous materials for paving are encouraged by the code to increase stormwater infiltration on the site. Code also requires all parking to be assessed by rear alleys or lanes when available. According to the code, uncovered parking areas must be provided within the second or third layer of the lot and not in the front of the lot, as in this case. An unimproved, narrow-platted alley does exist behind the property, but is not maintained and would not be recommended for business or public use. This case has been an item for discussion during 2 previous Heritage Preservation Board meetings on April 1st, 2013, and December 1st, 2014. In summary, as a discussion item, the applicant requested permission from the HPB to seek a building permit to install the turf block pavers as a method to alleviate drainage issues on site, which was then discussed again during the second meeting discussion period, and the HPB agreed to the request provided that the area not be used as a parking lot and a fence be installed across the lot. Following the installation of the turf block, wheel stops were added to serve as parking spaces on the surfaced area. The applicant never applied for a permit to establish the area as a parking lot. Heritage Preservation Board review criteria. In reviewing an application for a certificate approval, the board shall consider the following criteria. The height and width of any proposed alteration or new construction shall be consistent with that of the adjacent contributing structures and of similar character and architectural style found throughout the immediate neighborhood or district. Staff's analysis. The requested parking area in front of the structure is in violation of the city's land development code and the special area plan district regulations, and is not compatible with the character of the neighboring properties. Number 2, the width and height of windows, doors, and entries shall be consistent with the character of the building's original architectural style. We do not find this criteria to be applicable to the project at hand. The relationship of the structure within an historic or cultural preservation district to open space between it and the street, and to other buildings or scenic views, vistas, or streetscapes characterizing the area shall be protected through a site plan review process. Staff's analysis is that the residential and historic nature of the existing structure can be considered compromised by allowing for a parking area in front of the structure versus allowing parking to the side or the rear of the structure. The available rear alley in this case would not be recommended for use. Number 4, the shape and texture of the roof shall replicate the shape, texture, and type of roof distinguishing the building's original architecture. We also do not find that this criteria was applicable to the project. The size and mass of the building of the alteration shall be reflective of the building's original architectural style. We do not find this criteria applicable to the project. Landscaping shall be utilized as a means to enhance the architectural character and appearance of the structure and to protect and define open spaces and pedestrian ways. Landscaping has already been performed and provided on site. Number 7, distinctive architectural features shall be repaired rather than replaced wherever possible. Architectural details shall be treated so as to make the building consistent with the property's original architectural style and character. New materials should replicate the material being replaced in composition, design, color, texture, and other visual qualities. Staff's analysis is that parking is not typically provided within the front yard of a residential historic property, and the zoning district that the property is located in does not allow for parking within the front yard. Number 8, all buildings, structures, sites, and traditional cultural properties shall be recognized as products of their own time. Alterations and modifications or changes to a structure or traditional cultural property to not attempt to create an earlier appearance than the original date of construction. Staff's analysis is that the parking for the use is permitted on site. However, the front yard location distracts from the traditional character of the property and historic structure. Since the residential structure has been partially converted to commercial or office use, the guidelines for the residential structures are to be followed. The guidelines for the residential structures are to be followed. Traditionally, parking was accessed from the rear of the property and parking located in the side or rear yard. Number 9, the renovation of contributing structures in a historical cultural district or designated sites shall meet the Secretary of Interior standards. Our analysis is that the location of the parking area is not consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards, which requires rear access and parking or side parking. Number 10, the proposed project shall conform to the other requirements of this code and be in compliance with the applicable goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff's analysis is that the parking location does not meet the requirements of the zoning district and is therefore in violation of the city's land development code and the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. The impact upon archaeological sites shall preserve the integrity of the site, and there are no archaeological sites which will be impacted. Staff's recommendation is for denial of the applicant's request for the front yard parking area. If the board shall approve a certificate of approval to be valid for a period of 3 years from the date of today's approval. And property owners within 200 feet were sent with written notification of this application. To date, the department has not received any objections to the request. Any questions?
I have a question for the attorney. I think I'm the only person sitting here tonight that was actually a part of the original conversation. Is it appropriate to share that information, or do we strictly only go by what we're seeing in these minutes?
You would only go by what you're seeing in the applications that are before you, in the minutes that are before you, because that information that you would be sharing would be considered testimony, and you cannot testify to the board.
Okay, thank you.
I was also there too.
Oh, were you there? I'm
Yes.
sorry, I didn't realize you were there. I'm
So
sorry.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Right. Does the board have any questions for the city's application?
Is this property, to your knowledge, under any kind of code violation order, or have any liens against it for code violations for the parking lot that's currently there?
I
Or
believe,
has it ever had?
I believe that it has had code enforcement action against it, and that there may be some liens still that need to be settled as part of this, and this is part of the reason why this is coming forward, is the desire now to try to settle some of what's occurred over time on this particular property. Not being here for the whole time period, I would say that this has had quite a history. Matter of fact, this came before you as a discussion item, then went and they got permits, and things changed during the permit process. Code enforcement then got involved, and then the liens have been, steadily wrapped up on this property over time. So at this particular time, the choice is by the applicant to comply. And that's why they're trying to come through the process. Now, that doesn't mean that this board has to change its position that it previously had when this project came through, with the opinions that have. Staff cannot support this application because it's a violation not only of your design manual as it stands right now, but it's not, we do not allow parking in the first layer of development within the special area plan. And especially in an area like Tarpon Avenue, that's not a precedent that the staff is really interested in setting at this point in time, simply because of the fact that there are alternatives to this site. They could take an access for the special area plan. It's a little different for your design menu, but from a special area plan perspective, you can take an access back. You go past the first layer into the second and third layer of the property, and you can have your parking area in that. So that would be side rear area. There is an alleyway here, and while the alley might not have been maintained or might not be currently maintained, it is a public alley. There is the right to traverse it. The special area plan does support the use of rear alleys. I mean, many of the buildings that you're going to see over time that change here are going to be rear-loaded buildings, because that's the intention of your special area plan. It will allow an access point, but that parking in the front, that's a suburban type design. That's what our special area plan is trying to get away from. So as a result, they want it tucked on the side or in the back. Ideally, if it can be accessed from the rear, that's even better. But there are sites that we have in other parts of the city that's just not possible either, because the alleyways are either too narrow to allow for two-way traffic, or they are of a condition, there's some type of issue, there's a drainage issue or something like that precludes their use. So there will be some types of things that you need to overcome with that, but the staff, as the application sits, cannot approve it simply because it violates the land development code. Now, there are provisions in the land development code that the applicant can ally themselves with to ask for relief from that, but the way staff doesn't see how there'd be any way that we would want to support that, given the integrity and the intention of our special area plan. This is one place in the codes that the intention is the same as the design manual. The code is meant to prevent that parking from the front portion of the property unless it's on-street parking or unless we're dealing with a public parking lot. which we will be dealing with here shortly in the general area that this is in. We have a piece of property that will be coming forward, but that's the time we deal with parking in that front portion of a property. And so that's really where staff's position is on this. Obviously, there is some concern with the use of that rear alley. There, you know, it kind of dips and it's not a level, smooth alley, like you would expect, you know, a roadway to be. So as a result, that may provide some problems, but the access from Tarpon Avenue is not so much our concern as where that parking lot physically is right now is a violation. And this application, no matter what you do, this is not the end of this discussion. Because regardless of what this board does, if you choose to, you know, move forward and accept an application like this, I still can't approve this through the permitting process, because it doesn't meet the intention of the land development code. And I'm bound by not only your design manual and whatever you decide, also by that land development code.
If, can I ask a question? Just a process question. So if, whether approved or denied, if denied, is it like other applications that we have that would go to the Board of Commissioners after that, or
they can choose to appeal this decision, but the Board of Commissioners will hear the same thing from their staff that will basically state the issues with the variance process or some other type of process that to alleviate the land development code issue. There's two ways to alleviate land development code. One is to request a variance on a specific piece of property. It's the most appropriate thing. The other way that a commission could go is they could choose to amend the requirements of their zoning code. We would recommend against both of those, but those are the avenues that are open to that board.
Okay. I would like to hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Anthony Strukas, Signature Group of Tampa Bay. All right, so I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. If we didn't put the turf block in, the house would have sunk. It was completely flooded, and I'm glad that we did it. There's still piering issues that someone else is going to have to deal with. That's not my problem at this point. The property no longer floods, and the original intent is what we got out of it. So that works out great. Staff said that they don't have a problem with access. I think that blocking off the front access completely doesn't make a whole lot of sense. When you reread the code, it doesn't actually require that you put a fence across the front. You just can't park there. So in 2014, when I gave the place to my mom to run as her retirement antique shop, parking bumpers went in. I've had the place vacant for 6 months. I still get hit $50 a day, regardless of whether or not the place is vacant or not. So point is that I'm going to still use the parking bumpers. I'm going to use the parking bumpers to block the front so cars can't pull into the property. In the future, whoever chooses to ever purchase it, they can choose to go through variance. They can choose to go through any other process they want to. But since 2012, when we bought this place, the condition that it was originally in and the condition that it's in now, I think is great. I'm not asking for anything special. I know you're going to deny my application. And I apologize that it's taken 3 years, about my own personal ups and downs and health stuff that came in between and all that. But I want to get this thing taken care of. And I appreciate y'all even hearing me tonight. So I'm not asking for a parking lot. I mean, what I was told to do, best possible option, is to file for the parking lot application. If they say yes, great. Now you're still in compliance. You're in compliance because they approved it. Or you go before the board and they deny it, which we're going to get denied, and I can still become compliant, but without knowing or without trying it, you know, that's why we paid the $50 application. That's what we're here for at this point. So, again, I mean, there's specifics in there with regard to not recommending use for the alley, and. This whole thing started with I just wanted to put crushed shell down in the front because people parked in the front when I bought the house, and that's the way it was. And I was told, no, you cannot. You can put in turf block. So I put in turf block. That was 40 grand. And then after that, it was like, well, you can't use it as a parking lot. I was like, all right, just whatever. So again, I apologize. It's taken this long, but I'm going to keep the parking bumpers, but they're going to be used to prevent cars from coming in. The access from the front, from Tarpon Avenue, if you block it off with a fence, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You still need to be able to access it if you're a tenant or whatever. And hopefully if that alley ever gets redone, I can unlock that back gate. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens back there in the middle of the night. I don't think I'd want to be a tenant living in that property, knowing the things that happen in that alley overnight. So, not asking for anything, except for I apologize for taking so long for me to finally have it resolved.
A question for the attorney.
Yes.
Sorry, I just want trying to process this completely. The access is not part of the, he had just mentioned access is not normally part of blocking off access, is not part
I
of.
think the discussion that you guys had from one of the previous applications, and I guess I can testify because I wasn't here for those. So essentially, one of the tenants had been to require a fence across the entire frontage of that property,
And
blocking
that's
off
kind of,
that access. I think that was what was intended. Now, I don't know what the intention of that was because the access point at that point was in. What I haven't done is chase the history of when that access point was put in, but remember that Tarpon Avenue used to be a different road. It wasn't a city-maintained roadway. So the fact that it was a state or a county roadway, they did things a little bit differently than we do. They might not be as sensitive to requiring this review by this board, if this board was even in there when that access went in. I didn't do the history to chase the access points. Honestly, that's something that our code, okay, would allow for that access to go in here. Now, that's not ideal from the design manual perspective, but it's not something that's prohibited, I mean, outright prohibited in your land development code. Your design manual would prefer that rear access. But it wouldn't have prevented you to provide an access from Tarpon Avenue if you chose to do that. So you could legitimize that access point and allow that access point to continue. You could continue what the previous board had said, which is the fence across the thing. You have a lot of different options kind of open to you on what you want to do here. It's just staff is very limited with the history that you've had on this particular project and with the history of that roadway, and there's just many different facets here that we can't go forward, but this board, if you can come up with a compromise that this board is willing to accept, that's up to this board. I don't know that you have any interest in doing that.
my question that goes with what you're saying is that if the turf block, if that access, putting a fence up doesn't make a lot of sense, or it's not part of the guidelines, if approving something, did this board have the authority to say, yes, we'll approve this turf block if you make sure to prove to us you're not going to be a parking lot, and so part of the approval is that we want that blocked off. Does this board have that?
It was a discussion item and never was an application.
Exactly. You never did, and this is something that I don't know enough about how your board previously worked before the attorneys kind of got involved here, and we do things a little bit differently.
Requested the attorney.
But as a result of a lot of things that happened, you guys have made some changes. So it was a discussion item, so you never actually issued a certificate of approval with any type of conditions. You gave them guidance. They took that guidance along with the staff in the planning department at the time, and they went to the building department and they said, this is what we were told that we could do that would thing. And I don't know where the fence discussion got involved, if that was something that this board basically had said that that's what we wanted to see, or where that piece came from. But my question, and I don't know if you know this or remember this, is was that access point already there?
Yes.
Do you
Okay, let me
remember
ask you a
that
couple.
part?
Can I ask
Sure.
the applicant a couple questions?
Sure.
This particular picture, is this the house when you purchased it?
That's the house when I purchased it.
I don't see a shell
Yeah, I don't.
yard.
I
see a
know.
grass
I know. I
yard.
was asking for shell to be put in, and I was told no by the building department. Absolutely
Okay.
not. The neighboring
Then
property
the-
has
Hold on,
shell.
that's fine. The second question I have is, when you just stated you kind of, and I understand your frustration, but what you testified was that you did shell, and then you found out you were gonna do shell, found out you couldn't do that. Then you did turf block, and then you found out you can't do parking. Is
Correct.
that the truth, or did you know when you put the turf block down that this board really did not want that to be parking?
When I was told originally to put the turf block down because people historically parked in that yard, that's what the access was for. There
So
was
you're
never
saying that
access
when
from the
this-
front.
When you were,
I
the
can
guidance
finish
you
my-
received from this board did not include not using that for parking. Is that what you're testifying?
You can review the minutes which are attached. There was a condition that was put on there that would have not been actionable because it was not decided on by the board.
Thank you.
First. Second, I can respond, right? May I or may I? Not? Okay, great. Going into putting crushed shell in, I don't know how many properties around me have crushed shell. All around. All the way around them. Many in the city of Tarpon Springs have crushed shell. Would have been a lot cheaper to dump crushed shell in the front yard, in front of that access, and be done with it. And at the time, building department said, you will by no way at all put crushed shell down or you'll be out here scraping it all back up. And I said, well, what the heck is the point of that? Give me some guidance. They told me, great. You want to put something down to prevent this from happening? Go in for turf block. You don't even have to worry about a permit for it. Verbatim. Okay, great. We'll go for turf block. Put the turf block in. 40 grand later, I get red tagged. I show up before the board, and I was advised, don't even bring it up as parking. We just need the turf block to stay in place. Okay. What do I need this for? We have a major drainage issue. This place floods nonstop. I can't get somebody to rent it because you can't walk through the property. It's just flooded every time it rains. If the berms weren't done on the site plan that was proposed, that was approved, where we crowned the property, bermed the sides, and did what we did in the front yard, this place would still be flooding every single time it rains, mud, front to back. So, original intent, wonderful. If I would have been able to just put the crushed shell down in the first place, I would have never had 3 years of this. So,
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
okay.
Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to speak for this application or opposed to the application? Okay,
I have a question.
Yes.
Why does this show proposed parking area? Why does this paper show that?
That's part of the applicant's submittal information.
For now, this current application, is that correct? It's not part of the
I'm
prior,
assuming yes, but let me verify that.
that's what I was.
Yeah.
Would you like to come back and speak to the mic?
It was submitted as part of this application to support the application. It may have been previously submitted. I don't know because we didn't pull the whole packet to give you
Okay.
back
I'm
everything.
just trying to place it all together. So this was part of the 2016 application, that it is a proposed
That's correct.
parking area. However, the applicant just stated that the turf block was put down to prevent flooding. Is that correct?
That's correct. The turf block was put down originally, again, I don't know enough about the history as far as what the applicant was, what the city staff told to the applicant. Wasn't around during that point. But the turf block was originally put down to address the drainage issue. Then it was later converted to the parking area. And when it was converted to the parking area, that's where the violation
I see.
started cropping up.
The only thing I would direct you to is to the minutes, page 3 of
Thank
the
you.
first set of minutes. Ms. Benson said, the owner of the subject property has flooding issues and wants to install turf block in the front lawn area where there's a curb cut, and her concern is it would be turned into a parking lot, so that would require HPB approval, and a driveway would require HPB approval. The owner described the flooding problems and his plans for the property. It was the consensus of the board to permit the turf block with the stipulation that there will not be a parking lot, and fences to be installed across front of property.
So you guys.
And then my understanding from what's been presented tonight and in this packet is that since that has happened, pretty much from the inception, the owner has been notified that this is not the way it's supposed to be, and now we're at an issue where there's huge liens against the property and potentially could affect the sale, maybe?
That's
even?
roughly the issue.
After 3 years. I'm ready for a motion whenever the chairman will hear one.
Okay. Do I hear a motion on this application?
I would move to approve what the board, or to move forward as the city staff has recommended to deny the application. So would we vote yes to deny?
Depends on the motion that you just made. So you move to approve the staff recommendation, so you would vote yes to deny.
Okay, do I hear a
Okay.
second for that motion?
I second the motion.
We have a roll call, please.
Ms. Page?
I deny the applicant's request. I recommend the denial.
Mr. Bolton?
Yes.
Ms. Colianis?
Yes. And that completes our application for this evening. We'll move on to staff comments.
Staff doesn't have a whole lot of comments. The only comment that I do have is I just wanted to give you guys kind of an update on one of the projects that one of our the clerk's been working on. We're going to have to probably go through, once the board has completed its work, and look at your section of the land development code as well as your board and procedures, your procedures that you have, because the board in the future will be looking at basically taking all of the individual boards we have and unifying, how an absence is recorded, how the appointment procedures go, and all those types of things. Once they give us the list, I'll bring that back to you, and we'll actually workshop your board procedures so you can see the changes that are going to be required. I don't know that your section of the land development code will actually need to be amended. It may just be your board procedures, just to be consistent with whatever the board decides to go with. And at this point, it's very open. They haven't really made any decisions. The clerk's just putting together her recommendations, but I just kind of want to let you guys know that that's in the works. And then we'll probably bring the section of code when we do that to this board and let you kind of talk about it, because I have at least one outstanding issue out there, which is the demolition section that we talked about. But we also talked about that at the last board meeting, about the fact that it's very different than economic hardship, and you may have a desire to maybe talk about that. So I want to give you some time on one of the agendas going forward for us to do that, so I can bring that amendment back. But if we're going to do a larger amendment, I kind of want to do it holistically rather than doing bits and pieces. And then the other thing that I'm actually going to have Lisa start working on is kind of pulling together some of the resources that I've collected and some of the other things that are out there for the design manual update, because we need to start working forward on that. At least getting some direction from you guys on how formatting and what you want included, because what the board had recommended during the appeal process was that they wanted to see was, one, the design manual updated, but also they wanted to have a material list, an approved material list. And I know that's been kind of a sticking point with this board. I have multiple people who are asking for that on a regular basis. We just don't have it. So we're going to have to pull all of those types of resources from other communities and kind of sit down and just look at that stuff and decide what this board is going to recommend through your staff to the BOC for their approval for those two items. So we're going to kind of be working on that behind the scenes and try to get something to you before the end of the year. I can't guarantee with the current caseload that we have how soon that's going to get to you, but it's just those are the two items that I have kind of in the back burner that really are applicable to this board. So that's really what we have.
I want to bring up again about the minutes. I think we can see how minutes are very important moving forward, and we still are lacking minutes from as far back as December 2015.
2015 December, I believe that we have those minutes. It's only since.
I've not gotten them.
All right, well, we'll take a look at what minutes that we have left to approve. I know that I've authorized Kim to do some overtime, but she's got 3 boards that she's currently doing minutes for, so it's gonna take her some time to get caught up with all the boards, but she's currently in the process of updating those minutes, and we'll be bringing them forward as they're available. But I'll take a look at December, but I think that we got through December, but I'll have to verify that.
Okay, that would be great. That would be great. Any other board comments?
If there's ever any discussion of us not having an attorney present in our board, I'm so thankful that you're here, and for the first couple of years we didn't have one, and I'm thankful that you will help this board move forward effectively, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for the great, again, the report on Rose Cemetery. That was awesome.
Okay. Meeting's adjourned.
That's the code, right, well, that's for Tarpon's code, that's. I can't tell you what other cities do, I just know for the city of Tarpon Springs, that's what the code says. All right. Have a good evening.
And if you wanna keep just that part, you can too, like if you don't care about the other stuff, we can recycle that, but you can keep it all, it's okay. Yeah, I have one of that too, actually.
It's over now. It's not on our agenda anymore.
Thank you for coming. Because I was sweating, thank you guys for coming.
And I didn't get back. Did you call me? I'm so sorry. Today